Welcome back to the Short Game Podcast. It is Wednesday, March 11th. You are sitting there right now watching people who are half as smart as you pass you by in life. They are getting the promotions, they are getting in shape, and they are winning. It is not because they have better ideas than you, it is because you move too slow. You are sitting around, waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, and the perfect motivation. Overplanning is just procrastination in a suit. In the 13th century, a tribe of nomads conquered the known world because they refused to be slowed down by tradition. Today, we are reading the blueprint for outpacing everyone around you, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford. When I am running high-level campaigns at Nexier, I do not wait for the perfect conditions. We build the physical supply chain, and we drop assets on a VIP's desk faster than our competition can even draft an email. Logistics is warfare. If you want to win at life, you have to prioritize speed. Let's get into it.
What's your name?
My name is Tom Shelby.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
King Ragnar. That is my name.
Yo soy Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria.
I'm Batman.
This is Jon Snow. He's king in the north.
My name is Asax Schrader.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Antonio Montana.
My name is Patrick Payne.
My name is Walter Hartwell White.
My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Gus.
Welcome to episode 23 of The Short Game. We are continuing our brutal march through the Sovereign Week, a week dedicated entirely to command, reality, and the heavy burden of the crown. I am your host, Drew Meitner, and today we need to talk about why you are constantly frustrated. You look around at your office, your gym, or your university, and you see people who are half as smart as you absolutely winning at life. You are sitting there frustrated, wondering why the guy with a fraction of your talent is getting the promotion, getting in shape, and building his empire while you are still stuck at the starting line. Let me tell you exactly why you are losing to people who are significantly less talented than you are. They are executing out in the real world while you are still comfortably sitting in your bedroom planning. You tell yourself that you are just being cautious, that you are doing your research, or that you are waiting for the perfect moment. Let us call it what it actually is. Overplanning is just procrastination dressed up in a nice suit. Waiting for the perfect conditions or waiting for some magical spark of motivation is a complete clown mindset. The guy who takes immediate, messy action will always, without fail, beat the supposed genius who takes 6 months to write a perfect, flawless plan. Whether you are trying to get a massive promotion, completely transform your physical body, or build a disruptive new company, speed and personal infrastructure are your ultimate weapons. You are getting completely outpaced in life because you move way too slow. You act like the guy driving 45 miles per hour in the fast lane, completely oblivious to the fact that the rest of the world is flying right by you. To understand exactly how to build an operational machine based purely on speed, we are looking at one of the most ruthless operators in human history. We are pulling today's framework from an unbelievable book called Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford. When most people think of Genghis Khan, they imagine a wild, disorganized mob of bloodthirsty barbarians swarming out of the hills with absolutely zero strategy. That completely misunderstands how empires are actually built. In only 25 years, Genghis Khan and his relatively tiny Mongol army subjugated more lands and people than the mighty Roman Empire conquered in 400 years. He took a nomadic tribe of about 1 million people, forged an army of just 100,000 warriors, and conquered the most densely populated civilizations on Earth. Whether measured by the total number of people defeated or the total area occupied, Genghis Khan conquered more than twice as much as any other man in history. How does a ragtag group of illiterate nomads from the freezing steppes of Mongolia conquer the greatest empires on Earth? They did not win because they were just tougher or meaner than everyone else. They won because their logistics, their communication routes, and their absolute refusal to be slowed down by tradition were completely untouchable. The Mongols prioritized speed over absolutely everything else in their existence. While European knights were dragging around heavy armor and hiding behind massive defensive fortifications, the Mongols were operating like a highly disciplined, mechanized modern infantry. Genghis Khan realized early on that if he wanted to conquer the world, he could not be slowed down by comfort or by unnecessary baggage. Traditional armies of that era moved in long, lumbering columns, dragging miles of wagons filled with grain, heavy equipment, and a massive supply train. The Mongols completely scrapped that archaic model. They traveled incredibly light, entirely without a commissary or a cumbersome supply train. Instead of dragging slow-moving siege engines across the continent, they brought a fast-moving engineer corps that could literally build whatever they needed on the spot from available materials. When they arrived at a city after crossing a vast desert, they just cut down the local trees and built their ladders and catapults right there. They did not wait for the perfect conditions to move. They actually weaponized terrible conditions to their advantage. When Genghis Khan wanted to attack the empire of Khwarizm, he pulled off the most audacious surprise attack in military history by timing his crossing of the brutal 2,000-mile Red Desert for the absolute coldest months of the winter. He did this because in the freezing cold, his men and horses required significantly less water, and the winter dew stimulated grass growth for his animals. He intentionally took the route that other armies and trade caravans completely avoided because it was deemed impossible. The Mongols could travel 10 days without even stopping to make a fire or heat a meal. They would carry dried milk paste, put a pound of it in a leather flask of water, and let the galloping motion of the horse mix it into their meal for the day. If things got truly desperate, they would even drink their own horse's blood to stay alive and keep moving. That is the absolute definition of refusing to stop for anything. They did not wait to be comfortable. But to move that fast across millions of square miles, you need a flawless personal infrastructure. You need a communication network that does not break down the second things get chaotic. Genghis Khan created a system called the YAM, which was a brilliant network of fast riders and communication stations. He set up stations approximately every 20 miles, maintained by local families, to ensure that his arrow messengers could relay orders at lightning speed across the entire empire. Because his commanders were illiterate, every single order had to be transmitted entirely by word of mouth from man to man. If the communication failed, the entire army would collapse. He also utilized smoke, flares, whistling arrows, and flags for rapid communication on the battlefield. There was no room for error, and there was no excuse for a dropped message. He built an infrastructure that could handle the insane speed of his ambition. Genghis Khan also recognized that a leader must build roads before he builds castles. In fact, the Mongols made almost no permanent structures at all. The only permanent structures Genghis Khan ever erected were bridges. He absolutely spurned the building of castles, forts, cities, or defensive walls. But as he moved his army across the landscape, he spanned hundreds of streams and rivers, strictly to make the movement of his armies and his goods drastically quicker. He wanted absolutely zero friction in his path. If a frozen river stood in his way, he did not stop and wait for the spring thaw. The frozen rivers that Europeans relied upon as their natural protection from invasion became high-speed highways for the Mongols. They rode their horses right up to the city walls during the exact season that found the Europeans least prepared for fighting. They were the ultimate pragmatic operators. They had no ego about their methods. If an enemy had better technology, the Mongols immediately assimilated it. When they realized the Chinese had better siege weapons, they aggressively captured their engineers and forced them to build catapults, trebuchets, and ballistas for the Mongol army. They combined Chinese gunpowder with Muslim flamethrowers and European bell-casting technology to eventually invent the modern cannon. They did not care about the traditional rules of warfare. They did not care about honorably fighting face-to-face if a clever trick could win the battle faster. Genghis Khan recognized that warfare was not a polite sporting contest. Winning by clever deception or cruel trickery was still winning, and it carried absolutely no stain on the bravery of the warriors. In a tactic they called the dogfight, they would pretend to retreat in absolute panic, dropping their weapons and leaving their equipment behind. The moment the greedy enemy opened their city gates to rush out and gather the loot, the Mongols would wheel around, slaughter them on the open field, and ride straight through the open doors. They understood perfectly that a fleeing conquest was just as good as a stationary one. Genghis Khan literally smashed the archaic feudal system of aristocratic privilege and built a brutal meritocracy. He abolished inherited aristocratic titles. He rewarded men who came from lowly backgrounds and placed them in the highest military positions strictly based on their achievements and their proven loyalty. He brought order to a chaotic steppe by instituting the Great Law, which applied equally to the lowest herder and to the sovereign Khan himself. He created an environment where execution and capability were the only metrics that mattered. If you could not perform, you you were crushed. If you could perform, you were elevated to lead tens of thousands of warriors. He did not write 50-page theoretical essays on how to govern an empire. He just moved, broke things, assimilated what worked, and burned what did not. He wiped out entire civilizations because he absolutely refused to wait for the green light. Think about the sheer scale of what they accomplished without a single piece of modern technology. The hooves of the Mongol horses splashed in every river and lake from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. At its zenith, the empire covered between 11 and 12 million contiguous square miles. That is an area the size of the African continent and considerably larger than North America. Genghis Khan did not achieve this by sitting in a tent and hoping the weather would improve. He forced his army to adapt to whatever environment they faced. When the Mongols attacked heavily fortified agricultural cities, they did not just sit outside the walls and starve. They used their speed to terrorize the surrounding countryside. They systematically cleared out all the surrounding villages, capturing the local peasants. They forced these captive peasants to march in front of the Mongol army, using them to fill in the defensive moats with their own bodies. It was unimaginably brutal, but it was highly efficient. By doing this, they turned the enemy's greatest asset, their massive population, into their greatest liability. When the Mongols left a conquered area, they literally churned up the farmland with their horses' hooves to turn it back into open pasture. They wanted to ensure that the peasants never returned, effectively creating a massive buffer zone of open grazing land that allowed their fast-moving cavalry even easier access for future raids. Everything they did was designed to eliminate friction and increase the velocity of their movement. Even their societal structure was engineered for rapid deployment. Under the Mongol decimal system, every healthy male aged 15 to 70 was an active, committed member of the military machine. The entire tribe was integrated into the army, and there was no distinction between civilian and military life. If a warrior could not serve in combat, he was required to perform public service for the empire, doing things like repairing weapons, caring for the herds, or maintaining the supply lines. Everyone was an operator. There were absolutely no passive spectators in the Mongol Empire. They survived on the freezing, desolate edge of the Siberian forest and the Gobi Desert by relying entirely on their own intense discipline. When they lacked trade goods, they did not sit around and complain about the economy. They mounted their horses and went out to hunt for human captives to trade. They were an unstoppable force of nature because they completely eliminated the gap between having an idea and executing that idea in the physical world. Genghis Khan did not inherit a massive fortune or a stable kingdom. He was born into a degraded, violent world of tribal warfare, kidnapping, and slavery. As a boy, his family was abandoned on the steppes and forced to eat mice and dead things just to survive. Yet, from that absolute rock bottom level of poverty, he became the greatest conqueror in human history. He did not wait for a venture capitalist to fund his army. He did not wait for an elite education. He simply built his personal infrastructure, demanded extreme loyalty, and moved with terrifying speed. Now, let us connect these historical dots and bridge this theory directly into your everyday reality. A lot of you listening right now are completely paralyzed by your own perfectionism. You are hiding behind a 50-page business plan, a complex workout spreadsheet, or an endless list of prerequisites. You tell yourself you will launch the company when the branding is perfect. You tell yourself you will ask for the promotion when you finish one more useless certification. You tell yourself you will start going to the gym when your schedule finally clears up next month. It is all a lie. You are just stalling because you are afraid to step onto the actual battlefield. Let me give you a perfect example from my own life. I am a 25-year-old founder, and I built Nexier from the dirt up. I did not build Nexier by sitting in a coffee shop writing a massive theoretical business plan about how the agency world should theoretically work. At Nexier, logistics is the actual warfare. We operate in the ultra-competitive VIP access space, handling massive physical assets for high-net-worth clients, while other traditional agencies were busy scheduling their third round of Zoom meetings to discuss font colors. I was already building the physical supply chain, while they were waiting on slow traditional shipping routes and making pathetic excuses for massive delays. We were dropping custom physical assets directly onto the desks of VIPs and CEOs. We move with lethal Mongol-like speed. Speed is my absolute moat. I beat agencies that have 10 times my funding because they are bloated, slow, and completely bogged down in bureaucratic corporate garbage. They are the heavy infantry dragging their massive supply wagons, and next year is the fast-moving cavalry cutting straight through their lines. This brings me directly to the universal sovereign standard. A king builds roads before he ever thinks about building his shiny castles. You absolutely must build your personal infrastructure. I do not care if you are an athlete, a student, an employee, or a founder. If your daily habits, your workout routine, or your work output completely falls apart the exact second you have a bad day, you do not have an empire. You have a fragile, pathetic house of cards. You need to build your own personal Yamrote. You need a system of discipline and execution that functions flawlessly even when you are exhausted, stressed, or unmotivated. Motivation is a temporary feeling, but infrastructure is a physical reality. When you rely on motivation, you are just sitting around, waiting for the weather to be perfect. When you rely on infrastructure, you cross the frozen river and slaughter the enemy while they are fast asleep in their beds. You have to stop obsessing over the aesthetics of your goals and start looking closely at your actual supply lines. Are you consistently putting in the reps? Are you making the cold calls, writing the code, and moving the physical weight? If there is any drag in your personal pipeline, you need to ruthlessly eliminate it today. Stop waiting for the universe to give you a green light. The universe does not care about your carefully crafted plans. The market does not care about your good intentions. The only thing that actually matters in this world is how fast you can turn a thought into a physical reality. So here's your blunt directive for the day. Look in the mirror and figure out exactly what perfect plan you are using as a shield to avoid doing the actual difficult work. Identify the excuse that is holding you back from greatness. Stop planning. Build your personal infrastructure, map out your logistics, and stop waiting for permission. Just move. Move faster than anyone expects. Hit harder than anyone thinks is humanly possible. And do not stop until you have completely dominated your space. That is exactly how you win the short game. I will see you on the next episode.